Hilary, welcome. Thank you so much for coming along. It is such a pleasure to see you. I'm so excited for what we're about to speak about. For people who might not have met you before or come across your work, how would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, first I want to introduce myself by saying thank you to you for this project that you're doing. I think it's so exciting, and I can't wait to watch what people have to say. But anyway, my name is Hilary Webb. I am an author and a cultural anthropologist. I teach at Goddard College in Vermont in the United States, where I am the Consciousness Studies Concentration Coordinator. And yeah, Goddard is a very exciting place that is very humanistic existential in its approach to learning. So I teach in the graduate department. And the way it works is it's a low residency program. So really you can attend Goddard from anywhere in the world. It usually involves 1 week on campus where we meet with the students and have, just determine what they will be studying. And this can be really any kind of passion project that they want to do, that they want to dive into. And we ask that students come from knowing, being, and doing levels of their studies, which is fun. So to me, I just sort of bring that up because it's quite, for me, existential in the sense of really allowing the student to get creative, which I think is a hallmark of existentialism, bringing both the intellect and the emotional state together, which is kind of exciting. So that's a little about me and what I'm into.
Gosh, that sounds absolutely amazing. Well, yes, like you say, we're here to speak about existentialism. So a nice place to start might be how do you understand existentialism? What does it mean for you?
Yeah. Well, for me, I would say that existentialism is not so much like a formal philosophical system as it is a framework for exploring the questions of what it means to be human. So, for example, existentialism asks us to wrestle with questions like, to what degree am I free? To what degree am I limited in living the life that I live, in becoming the person that I want to be? And yeah, and one of the things I really appreciate about existentialism is that it doesn't claim to have any answers, any solid, hard and fast answers to that or any of the other questions, because it really realizes that each human life is made up of its own properties. So we're kind of like on our own path. The one thing that I would say what existentialism does require of us, it's not quite dogma, but we could put it in sort of an existential dogma, is, existentialism asks us to make very deliberate choices in our lives, and it asks us to take responsibility for those choices. So to my mind, you can't be an existentialist and use the phrase, I had no choice, because there are always choices, even if they all seem like bad ones. But that said, existentialism, I also find, is very forgiving and humane. And it really realizes in general that we've all been thrown into this world without a map, or with very few maps, or with maps that were made by map makers who didn't have the full map themselves. And so, there is this, my understanding of existentialism and this opportunity to, make the choice, take responsibility for it. And if it turns out to be the wrong choice, you make another choice, so that's kind of the play of it all. That's the exploration. That's the testing of the boundaries. And I do like to emphasize the play part of existentialism because I think existentialism has this reputation as being kind of a dour, serious, almost dark and depressing philosophy, and which, that's its reputation because it does, talk a lot about death and some of the more anxiety provoking parts of human existence. But I actually find it to be an incredibly, like I said, humane and fun way of dancing with our human reality and our lives.
I have the same experience with existentialism and existential philosophies, but why do you feel that that's the case for you? Why do you feel that your uh you're finding the lightness rather than the darkness, what stands out more about this way of looking at the world.
Yeah. I happen to be a person who just loves to dance with boundaries and see where the limitations are or aren't. I guess this sort of gets into the thing that got me into existentialism in the first place. In my mid to late 20s, I was spending a lot of time in the sort of self-help new age communities. And there's a lot of wonderful stuff about those communities. But eventually I did feel that there's a certain, or there can be often, a certain rhetoric of a sort of a denial of our humanity, this manic aim for perfectionism, for, if you're not living the life that you want to live, then you're the problem. You've thought, you're not thinking right, you haven't done your work, that kind of thing. And I remember the thing that really did it for me with all that is a friend of mine came to me, and she had been diagnosed with cancer, and she had people telling her that her mental state wasn't right, and therefore that's why she was invaded by this cancer. And it was this sort of blame the victim. It was I don't know how you experience where you are. I'll get a little controversial here. It sort of, to me, follows a kind of American illusion of meritocracy. Like, if you work hard enough, nothing bad will happen to you, and everything that you want in life will be yours. So I found myself getting frustrated, and around the same time, I was in graduate school at Saybrook University, which is an existential humanistic psychology program, which I highly recommend to anybody who's interested in getting a PhD in psychology, and specifically with the existential focus. I started reading Rollo May, who is an existential psychologist, who is one of my favorites, and reading about what he considers to be the three worlds of this interweaving worlds of existence that or consciousness, or maybe not consciousness, but existence, that we all sort of travel through as we're going through our lives. So, and of course, they have these very heavy German names, so I'll try to, not butcher the pronunciation. But so there's the Umwelt, which is the throne world. It's the world of physics, of gravity, of, our genetics, of tornadoes. And it's the things that this world of existence we get thrown into that we really have very little control over. Maybe we have a little bit of control over it, but not total control by any stretch of the imagination. When I throw a ball up in the air, it's going to fall down no matter how many ohms I ohm or how much carrot juice I drink, the ball's going to fall. So that's the Umwelt. The Mitwelt is the with world, the world of others. And, that's our interactions, like we're having an interaction now, or, we're engaging in this Mitwelt in a very, focused way right now. And of course, I can't control the questions that you ask me, and you can't control my answers. So we're doing this dance of question and answer. So, with other human beings, there's maybe a little bit more control that you might have than with the Umwelt, because we can, and I wouldn't necessarily call it control over, but a control in terms of being able to engage with the person and work out issues and have conversations. But as we know, even that is faulty and, not always successful. So we're not always going to get what we want from another person. So then there's the Eigenwelt, the world of the self, the sort of the inner workings, the way we make our own personal decisions, the way we feel about things, and that we have so much more control over. But again, not total control, because we've got our unconscious, we've got these inner impulses that we may not be fully aware of at any given moment. So Rollo May made the statement that if we are to deny any of these three worlds that we are constantly engaging with, we're going to live half lives. We're going to be frustrated. We're going to be terrified. We're going to be anxious. We may be all those things anyway. But what I found, for me, it was just a huge aha moment reading that, because it felt like such a sane way of approaching life. Like, okay, I might want this thing, but maybe I can't get it, because maybe, I'm not tall enough to get it. Or, circumstances are just not that a specific thing is going to happen. And what I found comforting and actually fun about that was, oh, okay, I get to relax a little bit. I get to be, I don't have to go through this checklist of what is going to make me acquire that kind of thing, whether it's a thing or just a way of being. Yeah, and just really, taking, for me, it was a way of taking things as they come, a way of understanding that, well, what I guess I would say about that is it's a beautiful thing when you let go of complete control. And I think there's nothing more anxiety producing than when you think you're in control of the entire world and try to exert that control over it.
And then are confronted by experiences which really shock you into the realization that that is not the case. And then you're scrabbling back for that sense of control again.
Yeah, exactly. Especially, my complaint with the new age self-help movement, especially when you have people going, well, if you aren't getting this, then there's something wrong with you. There's, something wrong with the way you're thinking, which is a kind of cruelty in my opinion. It's a denial of death. It's a denial of humanity. It's a denial of reality, which is not to say that being a optimistic, positive person isn't going to open up worlds to you that, maybe you wouldn't have otherwise, but there are limitations. So yeah, so there's really like, let's dance with these boundaries and limitations of the three velts and the life that each of us are living. And let's kind of laugh at and have fun with it, because when we bounce up against a wall, we can either bang our fists against the wall saying, why is this wall here? Or we can laugh and go, whoops, there's a wall here, and then feel our way around for the window or the door.
So you discovered Rollo May's work, and then what? How have you ended up from there to where you are now?
Yeah. Well, when I was in, as I said, I got to know Rollo May's work in my PhD program, and my focus is actually my PhD is in psychology, but my focus is anthropology. So I'm actually a cultural anthropologist. So I've taken some of the sort of existential ideas or the existential questions and have used those as a jumping off place for my work. So, for example, I did my PhD dissertation down in Peru, looking at how do indigenous Peruvians look at the world through the lens of what is called Yanantin, complementary opposites, which is a very different worldview than maybe the Western philosophy that tends to come from this antagonism of opposites. So the thrust of my thesis being, how does our psychological state change if we're looking at it through the lens of a dance rather than the lens of a battle, where you're trying to overcome the world in some way? And then the most recent project that I just did was going to Berlin and hanging out at a stand-up comedy club and experiencing what's called in humanistic anthropology communitas, collective joy, and exploring the light and the dark side of collective joy in the context of this comedy club in Berlin. So the way I think your question was how do I use it now that did I get that right? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I have an insatiable curiosity for how people around the world doing all kinds of different things respond to these very pan-human existential questions and concerns and problems. And it's incredibly fun for me, because I feel like, having done that, I have more tools in my toolbox for approaching what might be considered a problem in my culture. I go to Peru and I say, well, this is a problem. And they go, well, wait, it's actually not a problem. And here's why. So maybe not every problem is a problem. Maybe, I think we can get so caught up in our lenses, our cultural lenses of how we look at these existential questions, that for me, the most exciting thing is going to meet people around the world and go, so how are you addressing these issues? And what can I learn from you about, having more options, more choices, talking about how existentialism is really like make choices. it's hard to make choices if you don't know what your choices are. So that's my work, and that's what I do when I write books. It's really offering my learning process to an audience.
Obviously, I can imagine there's a lot, but what are some of like the strongest new insights that you've gained over these experiences and investigations that you'd like to share?
Well, I guess the first thing that comes to mind, because it's fairly fresh, because I just published a book called The Friendliest Place in the Universe, which looks at this comedy club in Berlin. So I, very much went into this experience of studying the secret recipe for collective joy as it arises at this international comedy club, night after night at this one particular comedy club in Berlin. And what was, I'll just preface by saying what was exciting to me was that at this particular comedy club, it's all English speaking, but it's people from all over the world. So the first night I ever went there was a comedian from Mexico, there's somebody from Iceland, Ireland, Croatia, you name it, just from all around the world. Same thing with people in the audience from all around the world. And we're all there listening to people talk in a humorous way about how they deal with the current political situation, being the person that they are, or what it's like to be, from Ireland now living in Berlin. And again, it was sort of these little 3-minute encapsulations of people's existential reality, which is why I, was like, oh, I'm coming back here and I'm going to do a big research project on this. So I was really thrilled by, and it was also the book that I published is considered, I call it an anthropological memoir, because it also basically tracks my journey of what it is for me to be a person with other people. So, for me, going into this comedy club, I was completely just enchanted by what I felt to be this incredible international love fest in a way, because this particular comedy club aims to be the friendliest comedy club in Europe. So they really set the stage for that. And what I learned through my research was that joyful togetherness also has a dark side. Which summed up, it can be the madness of the crowd. If you're all bonded with in a certain way, that can also lead to finding out groups, or attacking people. Let's say not literally in the case of the comedy club, but let's say attacking people who aren't part of that group, and all that collective joy can turn in on itself in a way. And what I was discovering is that not everybody I brought to the comedy club loved it. And it would actually I'd feel almost betrayed that my friend didn't like the comedy club. And I was like, how can you not like this? This is the greatest thing ever. And so I think I connect that to existentialism, well, because everything can be connected to existentialism in one way or the other. But also, again, there's this dance of the Midwelt. Here I had found my own Eigenwelt, my own self had found this, perfect place for me and what I needed and what I was looking for. But then to encounter this in this relationship and within my very tight-knit Midwelt, in this friendship, and realizing that she didn't have the same needs that I did. Therefore, this wasn't the place for her. She didn't, she thought it was okay, but she didn't love it. And so wrestling with the fact that, again, we're sort of we're all kind of, we're all different people living our different lives and needing different things. And one of the things existentialism has sort of, I think, taught me is and also my anthropological work is how important diversity of need is, and diversity of desire. And while it's comforting to have someone that you feel close to feel the exact same way about something. That's not always going to be the case. So to find some comfort rather than anxiety in the fact that we are all human beings living our different lives that are overlapping here and there, I think that's one of the things that I've taken from it.
This idea that when we find something that's really special to us, we want that to feel that same level of specialness to others, and yet that's not always the case. And how do we cope with them? It almost, maybe it feels like if it's a rejection of what we love, it's a rejection of ourselves in a way.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Yes, exactly that. And also, I was in my, in Berlin at a time, certainly a political time in history that we haven't left really, but that was very much like, how can we end this divisiveness? And so I think there was this part of me that was like, oh, we should all be like cosmic comedy, and we should all be, friendly and supportive and clap and cheer people on, even if they're not good. And, and yeah, where was I going with that? But just the desire to find a singular world that will solve all our problems, that will end the division, the pain and division, and everybody will, be happy forevermore. It's a, saying it out loud, it feels silly, but I think there, at least for me, there's like that core, Mircea Eliade called it what? I can't remember, but that desire for unity, that desire for before the fall when we were all one.
So do you feel that these projects are now kind of pushing you out of your own comfort zone then, away from that desire for singularity, and kind of instead embracing and promoting the diversity?
Yeah, I mean, it's a constant practice, because like any habit of mind, habits are hard to change, especially when they're things that we've been brought up with. So, whether it be that experience at the comedy club, or being able to see through this lens of the world is a dance, not a battle down in Peru, even knowing it intellectually, I can absolutely source back to it when I'm having those moments where I'm like, oh, but that person, I thought we were going to be best friends, but if that person doesn't like that, does that mean that we aren't going to be, what does this mean? How are we going to yes, so absolutely. So I think it's given me recognizing that I have that desire, so on some level, some desire for singularity, is a first step. And then acknowledging that, making different choices or having different opinions on things does not have to be the end of the world. It does not signal a betrayal. It is just as it is supposed to be. Because diversity, as I said, the more tools in our toolbox. And I think it comes down to learning respect. And I think the way to learning respect is also the relief of our own anxiety. I think sometimes a lot of the disrespect and a lot of the fighting, whether that's infighting or fighting amongst a group that you feel is the opposite of you, it comes from anxiety. And if we were to actually understand the dance that is our existence, Rollo May says, if you feel anxiety, good, because you're a human being, and it'd be weird if you didn't. So how do we turn that into a creative anxiety? So I think that is, I try to recognize my own anxiety as soon as I can and say, okay, how can I turn this into more of a creative anxiety? So something new can be birthed out of maybe these opposing views.
It makes sense though, because we, as a child, when we're initially born, our parents, especially like our primary caregivers, whoever they might be, they are our everything to our experience, to our perception, to our lens. They are everything for us. And then we kind of have to go through that stage of kind of, I suppose, just growing up and recognizing that it's not possible in life for just one person or a very small few people to provide us with everything. And I think that can be such a problem in romantic and or intimate relationships, or probably even friendships, where you and the lyrics of the songs, you know, we forget what we're also exposed to, but you are my everything, you are my world, you know, and we are kind of exposed to this idea that entities, whether that's a person or a place or an experience or a career, have to be completely fulfilling and tick all of those boxes, and then feel really helpless when they kind of fail to do that. Yet, like you're able to show in your own research, it's natural that different entities, different people, different experiences will fill different things for each of us.
Yeah. And that is such an amazing point that you make, and I think so important. Certainly, you know, looking at romantic relationships is a very direct, you know, clear kind, at least to me, that yeah, if you expect your partner to be all things at all times, you're going to be disappointed. I'm very happily married to a wonderful man who I've known for almost more than 20 years. Yeah, more than 20 years. But I also know, I need other people to, I won't run everything by him first. I go to my friends. I say, what do you think of this? And, it takes a village. I mean, it's sort of a trite thing to say in some ways, but we've so gotten away from that sort of village mentality where we're sort of these isolated pods. Here's my husband or my wife or my partner. Here's my best friend. Here's this person. And yeah, I think we do tend to get isolated in that way. Whereas I think in more sort of communal societies, that energy is spread out more and you're not relying on one or two or three people for everything, especially like emotional things.
Exactly, and that anxiety is just not as extreme when that one person fails to provide everything for you, because it's just natural, and there's that, I guess, comfort and knowledge that there is other resources available, and to kind of flow between who is able to provide or willing to provide that particular meet that particular need for you at that particular moment.
Yeah. Exactly. And it goes back to that Mitwelt sort of idea of, you're in a world with others and you can't control, other people have needs too. They're not here just for our benefit. So the dance is that, okay, like with my husband, okay, I could really, use a conversation with him. I'd love to get his feedback on this, but okay, he's traveling right now. I know he's really like he's not available to me at this point. And that's just how it is. And, or he's distracted, or maybe he's physically here, but he's distracted. And I mean, that's another thing that has my learning has done for me, is not to take things personally, or to take very few things personally. Yeah. Because, we have to acknowledge that everybody's living their own life. We can't control them. We shouldn't control them. It's the dance.
And struggling to accept people or things for how they are, we experience the frustration, the pissed offness, the anxiety, the upsetness, the being offended by them just being themselves, just existing as they should be. But because we have kind of created or imagined this idea of what they should be for us, and then they don't live up to that, then to be not just a people but experiences too, then that experience of feeling completely let down or panicked or anxious is something that we ultimately have created, right?
Yeah. There's the sense perhaps of suddenly being alone, like, oh, can I not count on this person because they're not here exactly when I need them? And that's in some ways the dance we do with ourselves. How do I self-soothe when nobody is available to me at the moment to help me soothe? So yeah, I mean, that is that interesting, again, I keep going back to this dance idea just because I find it so comforting and evocative and true for me, is that dance of individual versus collective. We are, certain existential thinkers are very much about the individual and don't follow the herd. And I'm not into that at all, I have to say. I find that also to be too this or that. We are social animals and we live our individual lives. And you can't live a full individual life without others. And you can't be a good member of your community without becoming an individual. So it's both and.
Like in many literal dances, there are moments when there is a collective dance, and there is moments when it's independence, but and even that collective is made of independent. It's a really beautiful analogy. Yeah,
that's great. I love that. It makes me think tango, because in a tango you have them sort of starting off different places, going together, going apart, going together. Yeah, the great cosmic tango.
So for people who might like to get involved with existential ideas, do you have any suggestions for them?
Yeah. My biggest suggestion, I would say, is explore, because if you read one existential thinker and you're not into them, don't just cut it off there, because one of the really exciting things about existentialism is that it's very broad. I mean, I think the nub, the similarity is these, let's say, anxiety, questions about, death anxiety or absurdity, or how do we find meaning? Those kind of things tend to be at the core, but every thinker comes at them from an incredibly different place. So maybe one thinker is too religious for you and that's not your bag, or another thinker uses too many exclamation points in their writing and that's not for you. I mean, for example, for me, I don't read a lot of the big heavy existential tomes. I love existential psychology. So that's frankly, when I'm reading about existentialism, I go through Rollo May or Irving Yalom or, many other thinkers that are out there. So, explore, have fun, play with it. Check out, one of the beautiful things about some of the more recent existential thinkers, Camus, Sartre, they didn't just write these very intellectual books. They wrote plays, they wrote novels. Even just, just doing a Google search of, what is existentialism? What are some of the main ideas? Then throw on your favorite film and see how do these ideas play out in film or in a novel or whatever. So that's part of the play of it.
I love that. And it's really, really tangible, like practical advice for how people can really take that first step. I really, really appreciate you sharing that. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I feel that existential ideas are really valuable, but for you, why do you find them valuable at all? Why do you think that they can be something worth exploring?
Mm. I think part of that's just kind of the way I'm built. I'm so intrigued by these questions. It's just a desire I think I innately have. But I mean, for anybody who's interested in the questions more than the answers, it's or even I mean, I would say existentialism is also very practical if you get past some of the more intellectual tomes. I brought this up before, but I keep going back to this idea of, Rollo May basically saying, if you feel anxious, then congratulations, you're human, and we're all going to feel anxious about things. It's certainly, I'll speak in a broad terms, like the Western world, we tend to get anxiety about having anxiety because we think, oh no, I have anxiety, I have to fix this. I have to not be anxious. I have to be, completely calm, self-aware, Zen. I am a creature of the light. So coming to terms with the fact that as a human being, we are naturally designed to have anxiety. Anxiety can be a teacher, but to learn how to take that anxiety and have it become a creative anxiety. What can you build out of that anxiety? What kind of Anxieties also can be, if sort of utilized and in a certain way, it can lead us to become more sympathetic human beings to other people. Because if you're aware of and you know not trying to push away your own anxiety, then it's much easier to look at the person across from you and go, yeah, you're probably experiencing anxiety too. How you doing? I'll show you mine if you show me yours. And I think we spend way too much trying to hide our anxiety and our twitchiness.
In what way is that different to how people from cultures maybe other than this very, as you say, broadly Western culture, who is, and I agree with you, I experience that a lot of the time, people being anxious about the idea of being anxious and being so terrified by their experience of anxiety as if it's something completely abnormal or completely overwhelming, even though they've experienced anxiety up and down many times and know that it will end in their mind, but how does it differ culturally?
And I don't have an answer to that, but it's a great question. And I do wonder if anybody has done a cross-cultural survey on levels of anxiety or how anxiety is articulated. I think that would be an amazing research project. I think I tend to qualify much of what I say with, in my culture or in the West, just because I don't want to paint a completely broad. It's hard to know with existential ideas, like how much is our humanity and therefore is true of every human. I mean, and I'm very cautious about trying to paint every, death anxiety on every single culture. So I just try to, I think, mitigate or be very aware when I'm talking about things like this, that I may be talking about just my culture. I may be just talking about me, which is entirely possible. Maybe nobody else on the planet feels the way I do. Okay. So I try, so I don't know. I don't know the answer to your question.
I appreciate you sharing that though, because I think as that plays such a massive role in the way that we as humans experience the world, is by assuming almost that everybody in the world experiences things similarly to us, and that therefore there are no other possibilities, that there is no choice about other ways of experiencing the world. But then ironically, there is also a sense that when we're suffering, when we're hurting, when we're in pain, suddenly my experience of that is completely abnormal, and it becomes therefore so overwhelming and so isolating, and nobody else in the world could ever, whether we're thinking that consciously or whether that's just our kind of extreme experience of it. And there is really an interesting paradox there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what your experience of this is, but I certainly know how comforting it is to talk to someone or read something that reflects my own experience, especially if it's a painful one. And I think all our experiences are flavored differently, have different, properties to them. We can't step into another person's shoes, but I think there are certain things that we all do share, or even if it's just the flavor of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you feel that there have been times in your life in particular where existential ideas have been helpful?
Yeah. So a number of years ago, this is sort of like, I think it was right in the time of sort of leaving that sort of self-help movement and going into existentialism. As a matter of fact, I think it was about the time where those two kind of overlapped. I was really in a place where I was like, okay, I'm getting my PhD, check. Okay, I own my own home, okay, check. Okay, I don't remember some random list of like what it takes for me to be like ready for a long-term relationship. And deciding I was, at this point in time, like, all right, now I'm going to start dating. I'm going to actually, I've enough with my career. I'm going to start dating now. And oh God, it was horrible, as anybody who's been on the dating circuit knows. And I was just I'm meeting all the wrong people, and feeling like, okay, I'm just all right, and coming then sort of reading on existentialism, I thought, okay, I've set myself up so I feel like if I do this, do this, do this, do this, then the universe is just going to grant me my wish. It's going to provide the perfect partner for me. And, that's all that needs to have happen. It sort of didn't occur to me that maybe you'll never be in a relationship, a long-term relationship. Maybe your life will be a series of short-term relationships. And maybe that's okay. That's what existentialism brought in was, hey, guess what? The universe is not working I don't know what the universe is doing, so I can't say, but, just checking on not necessarily mean you're going to get the prize at the end. You have to be comfortable, you, Hillary, have to be comfortable with the idea that maybe you're never going to be in a long-term relationship. Maybe that is not your path. Maybe you need to let go of that dream. So I did. And there was that sort of release of this image of a life that I had determined was the only viable life to have. And as soon as I let go of that, I went, oh, who am I creating that viable life for? Is it my parents who want me to see me settle down? Is it, society? Is it whatever? There are many, many ways to have a viable life. And yes, absolutely work towards what you want, but also recognize there's beautiful things that come out of every, choice of how to live your life. If it's true to you, and true to your experience in the world and done with good faith. So yeah, so that's when I think got sold on existentialism, was just because that's what I really took from it. Interestingly, a few months later, my husband and I got back together after being apart for 10 years, and we've been married for 12 years. So.
Thank you so much for sharing. And you really bring up that idea that we can live so kind of beholden to this imagined idea of where our life should be, what our life should look like. And I think part of what existentialism definitely has done for me as well, and I try to bring that into my work with clients and even my conversations with friends and colleagues, is if we are able to start questioning, why am I holding this idea? What has influenced this very strong concrete idea? Am I even aware of how fixed this idea is, and why that idea even is suitable for me? Is it even suitable for me? Start to kind of question, yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful reflection. It's true. I mean, how many times have you been in your life thinking a certain way, and then suddenly somebody says something or something happens, and suddenly you have this flash like, oh, I have other options. I do have choices. And again, I think one of the great things about existentialism's, sort of like impetus on make choices and be responsible, take responsibility for those choices, is it's a freeing kind of thing in a way, because suddenly you realize, oh, I've got to be consciously making these choices. Therefore, I've got to consciously recognize what my choices are, and because our automatic fallback may be just, oh, this is my only choice. Whereas when you get really sort of dogged with yourself and strict with yourself about make an intentional choice, and then you have to take responsibility for that. You can't blame your parents. You can't blame society. You've seen the choices, or you've looked at the choices to the best of your ability, the best of your consciousness can hold at this particular moment. And you've made the choice on your own. And that's daunting, but freeing, so freeing.
Blaming feels like comfort. I've noticed, blame feels comfortable, but it's not. It causes so much pain to the person that is doing the blaming, as well as maybe the person that they're blaming, if there is that, well, to use it to mitwelt, if that other person becomes aware. But the amount of pain and suffering that we cause by holding a blame, holding a judgment towards another is so extreme. But when we can let that go, like you say, the freeing feeling, the relieving feeling, we're just simply not having that as part of our existence anymore, and it can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, that desire to blame other people can often be a result of our own desire for this perfectionism and wanting to just, have being beyond reproach in the way we approach our lives. Again, rather than approaching it like a dance and then approaching the other person like they're also dancing their dance. And, we're all like, kind of clueless in a beautiful way. I mean, we get clues here and there, but we're doing our best. And it's that, it's that we do our best. And if we do it wrong, we try it another way. That's why, I do find existentialism very forgiving.
Yeah. It's funny because when you're saying doing a dance in relation to blame, it's making me think, like, if someone keeps stomping on your toes, whether by accident or on purpose, then get away from that dancer if you can. This is where that power of choice and power of just accepting them as them, doing their dance as that. I think that's such a lovely way to put it. I love your dance versus battle concept. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Now, you feel that we can speak forever as always, but we do have a time to bear in mind. So before we close, Hilary, was there anything else that you wanted to add to our interview today? Was there any other things that you wanted to share?
Oh, no, just to say again, I'm thrilled that you're doing this. I think that existentialism, we were discussing before we started rolling that there's a lot of reliance on dead thinkers, and some wonderful thinkers. So I highly recommend everybody dive into all the, any and all of the books out there, from ago. But existentialism sort of, I don't know when, maybe early 60s kind of took a back seat and kind of disappeared or something. And I like to think that it is having a resurgence because it is, as I've said, a wonderful framework, not a dogma, not a series of set this, that, or, this and that or that, but it's, a beautiful framework for people to make meanings of their lives and to recognize that we're not alone in our struggle to make meaning. So let's all be a little more compassionate and understand that we're all kind of fumbling here. So it's great that you're highlighting people of the current day who are really diving into these ideas in many ways. So I really thank you for that.
Well, I really thank you for being part of it too. And it's really nice to hear from, I think you're the second person that I've spoken to lately who have said that there is this sense of almost a resurgence or an expansion in existential thinking, and how that can be valuable and how people can get involved with it is definitely something that this whole project aspires to do. And maybe later down the line this will just be a funny little archive of lots of different thinkers from all around the world just having their thoughts about existentialism shared a little bit further.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah. Well, it's been such a pleasure for you to be part of this. Like I said, Hilary, I really, really appreciate your time. And I hope that somewhere down the line we will cross paths again soon. But for now, I just leave it by saying thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure.